All right, picture this. You're scrolling through social media and you come across a video of someone who was able to ramp up their metabolism and lose a ton of weight just by drinking a glass of celery juice at exactly 7:03 every morning, followed by rubbing 3 ice cubes on their face. You laugh, but also a tiny part of you wonders, maybe I should try it. That, my friends, is the power of anecdotal stories. We've all seen the amazing before and after pictures, heard the one health hack that's going to revolutionize our lives. And some of these things we can immediately dismiss as nonsensical, while others sound perfectly reasonable. So, can we trust anecdotal stories online, or are there some hidden dangers that we may not be aware of? Let's find out in today's episode. But before we do, make sure that you subscribe to this channel, like this video if you learned something new, and turn on those notifications so that you never miss an episode. So I was inspired to do this video after seeing an Instagram reel from someone who promotes the carnivore diet, saying that broccoli is really harmful to people's health.
Broccoli.
And this immediately set off some warning alarm bells in my head, because we have research that broccoli is beneficial to people, just like other cruciferous vegetable is. But yet this guy was saying that it's harmful. And to prove it, he had hundreds of personal testimonies from people who have cut out broccoli and were apparently feeling better than ever. So is this a good source of evidence to back up his claim? Firstly, before we get into some of the drawbacks of anecdotal evidence, let's look at some of the benefits of these stories. And while they may not be the most rigorously conducted clinical trials, they can be powerful anecdotes, powerful catalysts for change. So the first is that they are relatable and motivating. We can argue science for days, and trust me, I love getting into the nitty-gritty of these research studies, but nothing quite hits the sweet spot of motivation like a good success story, especially if they are before and after pictures. And if you see a normal person losing weight, not some multi-millionaire celebrity who has a private chef and a personal trainer, it can be really motivating and encouraging that regular people can improve their health as well. This makes our goals feel achievable. You know, we don't need to have millions. We don't need personal trainers, but we can change our lives and improve our lives just with the resources that we have available. And a lot of these stories have started to show the struggles of fitness journeys and weight loss journeys and health journeys as we've tried to remove this veil. You know, influencers don't have these perfect lives anymore. They're showing that they struggle too. And so that can be really relatable for a lot of people. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of everyone suddenly going on camera and recording themselves crying. To me, that can seem a bit ingenuine sometimes. It's like, oh, I'm crying. Let me just pause the tears, pull out my phone, record myself crying, and then post it all over social media. But showing the struggles, and yes, sometimes we cry. It's life, but recording yourself with tears streaming for social media, I don't know. I feel like sometimes that's a bit of a clickbait to get attention. But again, showing these struggles and that everyone faces struggles can be really relatable. And it can be really helpful to just, be that little boost of motivation that we need to get our lazy asses off the couch. The second benefit of anecdotal evidence is that they can be really, really useful for generating hypotheses to study. So, from a research perspective, they can be great as a starting point to then generate a hypothesis or a research question that can then go on to be tested in clinical trials. For example, if someone says they cured their cancer by drinking a glass of carrot juice every day, well, that probably wouldn't be a good enough reason for all doctors to suddenly start recommending carrot juice to all of their patients with cancer. But it could get a researcher thinking about whether or not this could be a valid treatment option or as an adjunct to normal standard cancer treatment. So they could then design a randomized clinical trial where they take people with cancer, and either these people drink the carrot juice or they take a placebo or drink a glass of water, and you can follow them up for a couple of weeks or months and see if the carrot juice had any statistically significant benefit for rates of cancer remission or health outcomes compared to the people that were drinking water or taking a placebo. And if these results are significant, it then encourages researchers to repeat this clinical trial or to try and understand the mechanisms behind why carrot juice can be so powerful. Is it the beta carotene? Is it some other nutrient? Can we reproduce these results with different populations and different types of cancer? And as researchers, we are constantly trying to discover new things. And a good anecdote can be the start of a new scientific discovery. For example, a lot of our research on different dietary patterns starts with someone who saw a population following a certain diet and they had lower rates of disease or improved health outcomes. And then you decide to go and test that diet on other people from other populations. So it can be really helpful for that. But using anecdotes as evidence itself is not really a good idea. If we look at the hierarchy of evidence pyramid, opinions, expert opinions, single case reports, anecdotal stories, they're right at the bottom as the lowest level of evidence that we have. Then we get case controls, cohort studies, randomized control trials, meta-analyses, and systematic reviews. But of course, I mean, we know from COVID that someone's aunt's sister's Facebook post comes way above that.
I Facebooked it on Facebook.
But the point being that these anecdotal stories are the lowest form of evidence that we have and the ones that we should trust the least, especially if they're going against the grain and they are not really in line with the other higher quality evidence that we have. And the third benefit is that they can be really useful in building a community and support. Now, another reason why anecdotes and sharing anecdotes and these success stories online can be so powerful is because it develops this sense of online community. People can get together in the comments, sharing their challenges, getting helpful advice on how to navigate these challenges, and just encouraging each other. And this can make the journey feel not so lonely and can also provide additional accountability. As we've seen that as a lot of people start sharing their journeys online from the start, it is this extra little level of accountability that you have to keep showing up for yourself and stick to your journey and your goals. And finding an online community can help you feel less lonely. We've moved so much of our lives online, and sometimes this can be really isolating and you can feel really lonely. And so sometimes helping or finding an online community can be really helpful and make you feel less alone in this journey.
Ironic, isn't it?
And I know this is sounding really ironic, but it can be very helpful to people. And you can also connect with people that you otherwise maybe wouldn't have been able to find in real life. Maybe none of your friends are really interested in a certain diet or in exercising, but through online platforms and communities and social media, you can connect with people around the world who follow the same diet, and they can be a source of support when you can't find the support in real life. For example, when I started following a plant-based diet and got into weightlifting, not many of my friends were into those things. And Instagram helped me to connect with a lot of people who are passionate about these same issues and topics. And I'm still friends with a lot of them to this day. So it can be really helpful for that sense of community and finding support and making friends online. However, while some of these positives are really important, we should also take them with a pinch of salt. So let's get into some of the drawbacks of anecdotal evidence. Firstly, there is a lack of generalizability. What does that mean? Well, just because something helped one person doesn't mean that it will help everyone. If we take migraines, for example, there are certain foods that can trigger migraines. And for one person, maybe coffee seems to benefit them. So they have this cup of coffee in the morning and they tend to have fewer migraines throughout the day. And so they go online promoting this new migraine anecdote.
This is a jumbo coffee morning. I need coffee and an IV.
And if it worked for them, they tell a lovely story about it. And you're watching this online and maybe you suffer from migraines and you think, maybe I should give it a go. But caffeine has been recognized as one of the biggest dietary triggers for migraines. And so many people who now decide to try this after seeing the story online may find that their migraines they actually start to get a lot worse because caffeine can trigger migraines. So just because something worked really well for one person doesn't mean that it's going to work well for other people. And when we have clinical trials and cohort studies, and better yet, meta-analyses and systematic reviews of all of this research, we get a much broader sense of how certain foods can affect many people. And there will always be some degree of interpersonal individuality, but this gives us a much more general idea of the large scale effects. So sometimes something may work for one person, but it's not exactly generalizable to everyone else with the same conditions. The second is that there is a lack of a control group. So how do we know that the one specific thing that this person is talking about that they changed is any better than not making any changes? Well, this is why clinical trials often have a control group. So a group that makes no changes or take some kind of placebo so that we can see, is the change we're investigating actually effective, or is it just neutral? And sometimes we can also compare diets head to head. So is one better than the other, or is one nutrient better than the other for certain conditions? Sometimes a diet or a product or a nutrient may seem promising, but when we compare it to making no changes, we may see that it has a neutral effect or it doesn't have any beneficial effect. Now, it's not to say that no one benefited from taking it. Some people may have improved, some people may have worsened, and overall, the average may be neutral. But if a randomized clinical trial shows significant improvements, it signals to us that, hey, these improvements weren't just by chance, and we may be onto something here. And this kind of ties in well with the third drawback, which is the placebo effect. Now, imagine you see a recipe for a superfood smoothie and it promises glowing skin and newfound energy. And so you decide to try it and you drink it one day and you feel amazing. More energy than ever before. You catch your reflection as you're walking past a window and you're like, hey, I'm glowing today. Well, unfortunately, this might be the placebo effect. This smoothie may have changed absolutely nothing in your body on day one, just from this one single smoothie. But you had a high expectation that it would. And so you believed that it did have this improved impact on your health. Maybe subconsciously you made some other changes, believing that it worked. You smile a little bit more or smile a little bit bigger. And so that's why you think that you're glowing. Maybe because you drank the smoothie, you subconsciously improved the quality of the other food that you ate. Maybe you skipped those donuts for lunch because you were full with the smoothie. And so you don't get that energy slump after the donuts. And so that's why you have more energy. Now, I'm not saying don't drink smoothies. I think that smoothies are an excellent source of nutrition. I love them. I think you definitely should have them if you enjoy them. But the mind can also play powerful tricks on our body. And it might be the placebo effect, especially if you are seeing these differences and improvements immediately. The fourth is bias, positive selection bias and confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is we are constantly looking for stories and research that affirms our beliefs. So if you see a story that is in line with what you believe, you're more likely to think, okay, this definitely works. And positive selection bias is, people who have very successful stories are much more likely to report their experience with a diet or a drug or a supplement than someone who had maybe neutral experience or a neutral effect, or maybe someone who quote unquote failed a diet because then they don't want to post about how this diet made them feel worse because they feel like a personal failure. And an example of this is the carnivore diet online. There are huge accounts promoting its successes. However, if you know where to look, there are also thousands of testimonials about the adverse effects and how they suffered these really bad side effects from a carnivore diet. people's cholesterol shooting sky high, people getting muscle cramps and spasms. Something that's come up fairly recently is because of their high levels of cholesterol, this gets deposited in the skin, and especially under and around the eyes. And this is called xanthelasma. So we're starting to see that as well. And one place that you can go to find out some of these stories is the Carnivore Cringe on Instagram. And you'll see a lot of people who had really negative effects. But as we start to like these success stories, the algorithm also starts to feed us more and more of these success stories. So there really is that confirmation bias and that positive selection bias. Now, neither side should be taken at face value, whether you're looking at the severe adverse effects of a single diet or you're looking at the complete wonderful success stories. You should see both sides and examine the evidence behind them. And really, not just take one side at face value, but try and see the whole bigger picture. And especially on social media, these algorithms may only be feeding you one side, and a single anecdotal story may not tell you the full story. The fifth drawback is the short-term harm. Now, I've been seeing a trend recently, which seems quite ridiculous, but it is becoming kind of popular. And this is where people are self-administering coffee enemas.
Weird stuff. But stuff.
I know. They make a pot of filter coffee, hopefully let it cool down, and then they stick a tube up their butt, hang up this bag of filter coffee and let it, drip into their colon. And then they clench like they've just eaten a triple spicy burrito without a toilet in sight. And they hold it in for around 10 minutes and then they let it all out. Now, as you can imagine, this has quite the laxative effect. So if you're constipated, this might help you feel amazing, but do not try this at home because the short-term benefit for some people comes with many short-term risks. And as little as one single coffee enema has been found to cause colitis, which is inflammation of the colon, and rectal bleeding. Some people have even suffered rectal burns because not only did they use coffee, but they used a hot coffee. Sometimes you see a warning label and you wonder, that's strange. I wonder why they're warning about this. We might start to see coffee labels with warnings saying for oral ingestion only. And if using per rectum, which we do not recommend, make sure it's cooled down first. Well, now you know where that comes from. And not even are there these kind of not so nice side effects, but several people have actually died from coffee enemas. And some of them did have metastatic cancer and they refused traditional treatment in favor of these alternative medicine, coffee enemas. And if you do it regularly enough or use a large enough volume, it can cause electrolyte imbalances in the body. So you're getting all that extra water, sodium drops dangerously low in the blood. And so some people have died as a result of that. But if you go on these social media pages that are promoting these coffee enemas as the magic bullet that's going to completely change your life, you only see the promises of improved energy and relief of constipation and mental clarity. So just beware that some of these things may have very, very dangerous short-term harms associated with them. So you do need to be a little bit careful when you're seeing these. And the sixth drawback is that there may be some short-term benefit, but in exchange for what long-term harm? And an example of this is the keto diet or other iterations of these low carbohydrate diets. And people immediately see short-term weight loss when they go into ketosis and they cut out most of their, or if not all of their carbohydrates. And a lot of this is water weight initially. And what does that mean? Well, we store carbohydrates in the form of glycogen in our muscles. And as we store glycogen, it also draws water into the muscles. So if you stop eating carbohydrates, your body is going to use that glycogen that you have stored in your muscle. And so as you're ridding your muscles of glycogen, you're getting rid of all that water, you're peeing it all out. And so a lot of that water that we're losing is the initial weight loss that people see on the keto diet. They may also see short-term improvements in their blood sugar control. Again, your blood sugar is largely dependent on the carbohydrates that you eat. So if you're cutting out carbohydrates, your blood sugars are most likely going to be lower. We can expect that, but this doesn't really address the underlying insulin sensitivity, especially for people with type 2 diabetes. And we are going to go deeper into that topic in another episode on diabetes, so stay tuned for that. However, with these short-term improvements in weight and blood sugar control, there are also some long-term harms with consuming so much meat and other animal products, and also harm from the flip side, which is excluding fiber and a lot of these phytonutrients that we get from plants. So even if it seems great at first, and maybe you see some of these benefits in the short term, there may be substantial health risks to some of these online anecdotal success stories. And often these long-term risks of certain diets and trends aren't exactly explained when someone is showing off their six-pack abs and trying to get you to buy their supplements. And finally, the seventh and final drawback to anecdotal evidence is that people may be overselling or overclaiming or simply not telling the whole truth.
It's the basic truth of the human condition that everybody lies. The only variable is about what.
We know that sensational stories get a lot more clicks and engagement than average ones. So if I'm trying to lose weight and I'm watching someone who sustainably lost half a pound a week for 6 weeks and they're continuing on this long-term journey, or I see someone else who lost 20 pounds in 6 weeks and claim that they can help you do the same thing, which one am I going to be pulled towards? Which one are you going to be drawn towards? It's not really rocket science, right? We like that instant gratification, the instant results, and we like these sensational stories. But some of these people may not be telling the whole truth. Maybe their salad comes with a side of Wegovy. Maybe they post that they're eating 3,500 calories a day, but it's more like 1,800. I'm not saying everyone is lying. I'm just saying be cautious that you may not be hearing the whole truth and there may be other factors at play, especially when people are profiting off of their stories or they're making their own products or supplements that they're selling at the same time. Remember when the Liver King swore that he had never taken steroids and that all of his muscle that he built was just from working out and his very meat-heavy diet and his ancestral supplements that you can find in a link in his bio. And then remember when it came out that he was actually spending thousands a month on steroids through some leaked email. So just bear in mind that you may not be getting the whole truth. So in conclusion, anecdotal stories can be wonderful for motivation and support, but a lot of what we see online is not really evidence-based, and some of these recommendations may be pretty darn harmful. So take them with a pinch of salt. Thank you for watching or listening to this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something new, and let me know in the comments what you'd like to hear about next.